Hey y'all, welcome to a best of edition of the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. These best of editions of the show feature amazing guests and episodes of the podcast you may have missed when they first aired. If you are new to the show, these are those can't miss episodes we really want you to listen to. Or maybe you're a long-time listener. We want to bring these episodes back around for you to enjoy again. Our goal is to bring you our best content every week so you have everything that you need to build a better future for your family. So wherever you are listening today, enjoy this week's best of edition of the Flip Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome to the Flip Lifestyle Podcast, where life always comes before work. We're your hosts, Shane and Jocelyn Sams. We're a real family that figured out how to make our entire living online. And now we help other families do the same. Are you ready to flip your life? All right, let's get started. What is going on, everybody? This is Shane and Jocelyn here, fliplifestyle.com. Super excited to be back with you for another podcast today. This one is going to be a little different than our normal podcast where we're helping our people take their online business to the next level, members of our Flip Your Life community. Jocelyn and I actually are having a book written about us. An author is writing a book about our story. And a part of that process is we are recording our story on audio for her to listen to go through, kind of like in an interview style format. And Jocelyn and I are sitting here recording, and we thought, man, what a great opportunity to kind of fill in the gaps. I know a lot of you listen to our podcast for online business advice and things like that. But what a great opportunity to share our story with you, how basically two normal people from really, really small rural communities in Kentucky, over a period of time, we went through our careers and we learned about online business, and we ended up creating this amazing life that we didn't even know existed a few years ago. And maybe just let you guys in on that and let you walk that journey with us, listen to it and listen to our story, and maybe inspire you and let you know that you can do this too.
And today we're starting out with our early life. So a lot of you guys have listened to us on other podcasts, and you've heard a lot of our story from like the past 5 years. But what you really don't know is more about us from the past 35 years or more.
That dated us, Jocelyn. You totally dated us right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to release these every week as we record them, and we're going to let them kind of roll out. And this is going to be our story, our journey, how we got to where we are literally right now today from A to Z. And we're going to kind of look back and connect the dots. We were writing an outline for even today's podcast, and it's mind blowing when we were reading it. We both just like stopped and we're like, this doesn't even sound real. It doesn't even sound possible. Like, it's incredible when you see, looking back with 2020 hindsight, how all of the dots kind of aligned and everything kind of, all the puzzle pieces kind of came together. And what we want you to do is to listen to these podcasts. You're going to get a ton of information out of them that is going to help you succeed in your journey too. And it's going to help you can see those dots in your own life and see how you have all the puzzle pieces right in front of you. And you just have to kind of move them around and connect them together. All right. So we're going to jump right into it. Do you want to start?
Well, we were just having a conversation. Who's going to start? And Shane's like, you start. And I'm like, no, you were born first.
So this is like those board games we play with Anna Jo, and she gets really upset if it's the youngest person first or the oldest person first. So I think we have opened the box to a board game where the oldest guy in the room gets to start off the deals. So my story basically starts in a really, really small town in southeast Kentucky. Very much a coal town. We're a railroad town. We have a depot here. And basically all the coal that comes through the mountains of eastern Kentucky comes through my little town. So that was kind of the industry, the railroad, the coal miners. We had less than 5,000 people in my town as we were growing up. Really just a very rural childhood. And I lived in the city limits, what we would call a city. It's not really a city, but I lived inside the city limits. So I didn't live out in the country, but a very rural upbringing, not anything remotely related to technology or being able, big business or anything like that. So there was basically people were school teachers, coal miners, or they worked at the retail stores like Walmart or something like that.
Or maybe at the hospital. Yeah, things like that. That's the kind of jobs that we would have around here. I'm actually the fourth of 5 boys. My parents have 5 kids. There are huge age differences between us. My oldest brother
is 19 years older than me. I've got another brother that's 18 years older than me. And then there was a gap between the middle of all five of us. Next brother up was 9 years older than me. And then I have a little brother who's about 3.5 years younger than me. So huge span of children in my family and lots of different age groups. So it was kind of like weird because when I was born, like two of my brothers were not even in the house and one of them was in college. Or when I was like 9 years old, he'd moved off. So by the time I could remember things and I was a kid, three of my brothers were gone. So it was kind of like I was the oldest of me and my little brother. So just a bizarre kind of family dynamic in that.
All right. I actually grew up in a small town in western Kentucky, very flat land.
Still a coal mining place, though.
Yeah,
it's a big
definitely.
Coal mining place.
Coal mining is the major industry there. And I was born in 1980.
Oh, yeah. I was born in 78. I'm a child of the 70s.
Barely.
Right.
My parents, they were really young when they had me. My mom was like just out of high school. Actually, I think she was in high school. You know, they started from a very young age. They worked very hard to make sure that we had everything that we needed. I have a sister. She is 3 years younger than me. And we grew up in just a neighborhood. We had a lot of friends who lived next door. There were probably, I would say, maybe about 30 houses in this neighborhood. And it was the 80s. So, you know, we all ran around and played together and
rode bikes.
Went out at breakfast time and came in at dinner time. That's, you know, just what we did. So I spent a lot of time outside and a lot of time playing. No iPads or technology at that time. You know, I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a time like that.
And it's pretty cool. I think we had similar childhoods growing up because we both grew up in very traditional Southern type towns, went to church on Sundays, hung out with the neighbors. Both of our moms stayed home and while our dads worked. And, you know, it was just like good, slow paced Southern life before the internet, before we had all this technology and stuff. My dad worked really hard, too. He was an insurance agent. He had his own little independent office where he sold auto insurance. He had his own business. So that was kind of cool. I think that might be like where the seeds of entrepreneurship kind of were born in me because I can remember my dad telling me about jobs he had. He used to drive to Chicago from Kentucky to work in the steel mills during the week, and they would drive back to Kentucky. And this was like before interstates, basically, were really in place. And he would come back on the weekends to, you know, come down here. And he always told me about these grocery stores or restaurants or places he worked. And
he would like sleep in the steel mills, like up in Chicago,
like under the boilers. Yeah.
He's told us about this before. So they would drive up there to Chicago. They would sleep in the steel mill, and then they would drive home to Kentucky on the weekends.
Yep. So they would work there all day, sleep under the boilers at night where it was warm, and then they would get up and work, and then they'd come home, and they just all piled in a car and did that. But I remember that because he would always tell me growing up, I was like, well, Dad, why do you do this? Everybody else has a job. What are you doing? He goes, well, I just decided that I would rather be broke and work for myself and have my time freedom and be able to go to your ball games or something like that. That always really kind of stuck with me a little bit. He just said that he, you know, had worked for other people and he decided it was just better through the ups and downs, the thick and thin stuff to go kind of at it on his own. So that's what he did.
And he's made it a long time. I mean, he's still there today.
Yeah.
So still
he's 70-something years old, and he's still going in every day, and he loves what he does. Other than that, it was just very traditional. You know, we grow up, go to ball games, play baseball in the summer, play basketball in the fall or in the winter, and play a little football in the fall. And you know, we never really traveled much or did anything. I didn't really know a lot about, I guess, the rest of the world other than what you saw like on TV or something, really, until I went to college. The farthest we ever really drove was maybe up to Lexington, Kentucky, or down to Knoxville. That was the big city for me, you know, 250,000 people. That was my New York, I guess, growing up. I didn't even fly on an airplane until I was in my 20s. So just a very small town, sheltered kind of life.
Well, my dad was a cable engineer. He's been doing that for a very long time.
He was the cable guy.
Yeah.
Climbing poles and hooking up cable systems and all that good stuff.
My dad, he's a super hardworking person. Just something I really respect about him for sure. I can remember that he always worked extra jobs. Like he was an engineer, a super smart guy. So people would hire him to do things on the side. Like I remember he installed satellite dishes, and he worked with a guy who did like audio visual type things for a while. I can remember going places with him sometimes at night, like when he would install somebody's satellite or something like that. That would be how we would spend time together a lot of times. So I remember those types of things as I was growing up. And my mom, she helped us do everything. She helped us with our homework when we came home, make sure that we were reading, which really wasn't a problem for us because we loved to read. So,
but she probably helped you learn that.
Oh yeah, of course. Like she would always work with us and make sure that we had everything that we needed for school and take care of all the grocery shopping and the cooking and the cleaning, all of those types of things that have to be done. My parents, great people, really appreciate everything that they've done for me growing up. We also did not travel a whole lot. We would go to kind of the surrounding larger towns, which in Western Kentucky are not
like
very
two
large.
of them.
Yeah.
Bowling Green.
Owensboro,
Right.
we would go places like that. We would do that. We didn't get to take a lot of vacations like far away. We instead would go camping. And those are some of my fondest memories growing up. We started out tent camping and we had a boat. So we would take it out on the lake, and we eventually were able to get a camper, which was awesome. And we had an old black and white TV
Was
in
it
there.
was it like a pop-up camper?
No, it was just like a regular camper.
Like a little square thing you hook up to a truck kind of deal?
And it was like orange and white. I remember that. And we would pull it with like this old green and white truck. We called it Alice. And
I think it was the 80s. So like weren't all campers orange and white back then with big stripes on them?
Probably. I don't know. But yeah, we would take our camper down to the lake. We would go out and ride in a boat. And those are some of my most fun memories growing up. Like I can just remember going to the campgrounds. We would go to the pool. We would swim in the lake. I was saying we had an old black and white TV in the camper, and we thought that was like the greatest thing ever because, there was no internet. There was nothing back in the 80s. And before, when we were tent camping, we just had our books, which was awesome. But then when we had this black and white TV, like we were really high tech. Yeah.
All three channels that you picked up on the airwaves. Our upbringing was kind of cool because I would never say we were poor, like we were, farming for our food or anything. But like, we were middle class. We just didn't have a ton of stuff. I grew up in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. We finally, when I was in high school, I think my sophomore year in high school, maybe my freshman year, we built onto our house. And it was like the first time I'd actually got my own room because I had to share a room with my little brother. But I did get to see our parents. As I grew up, they worked so hard and they built onto their life. And I saw kind of the value of how working hard works. Like my dad had this little bitty office that was seriously, how big do you think that building is? It couldn't be 15 by 15, maybe.
Yeah,
it's really tiny. He had this little bitty tiny office. And for the first 10 years of my life, I can remember going in that little office after school, and my dad would put my Legos up on the shelves. And it was also, I loved going in his office. But it was this little bitty room. It probably was about as big as the room we're in right now in our house. And I can remember when he upgraded to this bigger space, this bigger office. And I thought, man, that was the coolest thing ever. Because he just you could see the fruit of his labor. And I remember when we built onto our house, basically I had 5 brothers and their families, and everybody came over to this little bitty tiny house. We actually had this room, we called it the back porch. There used to be a back porch on it. And my mom and dad built walls and made it like a sunroom. But we kind of took it over as the kid room because it was like extra space. Then we closed in the area that was between the patio and the garage and made this big living room. And I got a room on the back, and it was cool watching that progression of we started with very little. And as I got older, things got better because they worked so hard. So I think it was cool that I didn't necessarily have everything growing up that I wanted, but we always had our needs met. And I got to see my parents build a life. And I think that definitely had an impact of kind of the stuff that we're doing now.
Yeah, no, I definitely had a similar situation. When my mom and dad started, like I said, they were super young. Like I can't even imagine my life right now, just the way that they had to start out versus the way I started out. Like it's crazy, but they started out in a trailer, just in the middle of nowhere.
Stereotypical Kentucky trailer kind of deal.
Yeah, and not too much. After that, they were able to get a house, and they later built a house.
And when we say built a house, Jocelyn's dad literally poured the concrete, hammered the wood, put on the roof, pretty much built the house that they have now by hand. In his spare time
Yes.
when he wasn't being a cable guy. I mean, yeah.
He did a great job on that, and they still live there today. Like, it's a beautiful house. So they have just worked hard and
basically from nothing.
Yeah, and they've done a great job. So they built on what they had, the same as Shane's dad's insurance agency. And today their life is much different than it was when they started out. But it's awesome to be able to have been a part of all that transformation.
There's a great book called Outliers where it talks about people who took advantage of their unfair advantages. You have guys like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. Bill Gates, his unfair advantage was he was born into a wealthy family, and there was only 3 or 4 computers in the 60s, all around the country or something like that. Well, his high school or his school something had access to one of these supercomputers. So he got to learn it early. I think if I remember the book correctly, Steve Jobs, he lived down the street from Hewlett Packard. So he would go tinker in his garage, and that's kind of was his unfair advantage, the neighborhood he lived in and the people that he had around him. And I think that an advantage that Jocelyn and I had was we grew up in poor southern Kentucky towns to parents who had to work really, really hard for everything they had, and they did an amazing job modeling that for us. And that kind of gave us the foundation that we were able to go forward and say, hey, we see something, let's go get it.
And the reason that we start here and tell you guys this is because I think a lot of times people want to think that, that person has a trust fund or that person, somebody gave them tens of thousands of dollars to get their business started.
Or they look for a variable. They look for the person. What was their magic pill? What makes them different than me that lets them succeed and me not, basically, right?
Yeah, and we didn't have that. I'm just saying, we got started all on our own. We certainly had support of a loving family.
A loving family.
That goes I don't discount that in any way, but we didn't have some super privileged upbringing is what we're trying to tell you.
Yeah, we didn't have the financial advantages of some other people that, we've met people that started a business and maybe someone funded it for them or gave them, the money to seed their capital for their first business venture or something like that. But we literally started from nothing. We started life, just normal, total upbringing. When we were starting our business, which we'll talk about later, we had nothing. We had no extra money, no extra time. And all we had was
a lot of drive
and ourselves. So that's kind of the moral of this story is, you can definitely rely on that work ethic and those things you've learned, the lessons of life growing up from your parents or from other people or whatever, and turn that into something successful. Now, while Jocelyn's values and my values are aligned and we had very similar socioeconomic and regional upbringings, we could not have been two more different people when we were growing up. I was a total knucklehead when I was in school. I was a football player and was kind of a troublemaker. I never did anything too illegal, but my mom and dad may have had to pick me up from the local police station once or twice.
And how many times did you get kicked out of school?
I got kicked. I actually got sent home from school a few times. I never got expelled.
I got suspended.
I got suspended a few times. I liked to fight and do some things like that. So I was kind of gosh, it's so funny. I've literally had former teachers, when they hear what we do now, say, are you sure that's you? Are you sure that's Shane?
Is it a different brother?
Is this a different brother? There's 5 of them. You know what I mean? That can't be the same guy. I always tested really high on the test scores. And then, I would make terrible grades or I wouldn't do my homework and I just didn't care about school.
And people got mad because you were part of the gifted program, right?
Yes. When I was in 6th grade, they put me in this thing called SOAR, which was our local gifted and talented thing. And you got to go take classes at the high school. So here was me getting on the bus, this knucklehead who, just got off suspended from something or, whatever I was doing in school. And I'd get on the bus to go over to the, where'd we go? We went to the middle school and to do those classes. And sometimes we go to high school and you'd see all these other
straight A students,
straight A smart people. And someone literally, this is how big of a knucklehead I was. Multiple parents literally called and said they did not want me to be in the SOAR program, the gifted and talented thing, because they didn't want me with their kids. So that tells you what kind of idiot I was. And I was just man, I just hated the structure of school. I hated the rules. I hate following rules even today. It just irks me when I'm on a railroad track. I can't be on a railroad track. I've got to be out exploring or something like that. And the things that I did love I loved sports. I absolutely loved playing football. I loved media classes. I got to be the producer of our local news show on our high school news program. Loved media class, loved editing, loved technology. And but just from a school perspective, I just hated it. I actually almost missed graduation because we had to do these portfolio things and we didn't get it done. And I just thought it was the stupidest thing in the world. I hated keeping up with it. And I literally almost did not do it. And my mom and I were like the week before graduation, we're frantically trying to get this thing done. And but Jocelyn was a little bit different when she was in high school.
Yeah, so growing up, I would say, and I know that you long-term listeners, you will totally get this. I was a very high achiever. I've always been a high achiever. I don't know why. I think that part of it is just my upbringing. Like, you know, my parents didn't necessarily pressure me. It's just they always expected us to do our very best. But I think, honestly, it's just something that's in my DNA. Like, it's just very important to me to always be a high-achieving person in anything that I do. And growing up, I wasn't necessarily competitive like with other people. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing everything that I could do. I generally made straight A's in school. I mean, there were a few times that I got a B and once even a C in math. Imagine that.
Yeah. Once again, longtime listeners, we're not so good at the adding and subtracting over here at Flip Lifestyle World Headquarters.
Yeah. So my very first C ever was in 6th grade in math. So that was a fun fact about me. But and I cried, and you know, my parents were like, "What happened?"
My parents cried for joy when I got C's. You didn't get a D. You didn't fail. Good job, Shane. Woo!
That's not because you were not intelligent.
I just didn't
because
care.
You didn't apply yourself.
I never did homework. Wait till we start telling you about college, and you hear how many times I went to class. Like, I don't know how I have a degree, to be honest with you.
So, you know, back in school, like, I was always just I just followed the rules. I went along with the plan. I didn't really cause any problems.
Jocelyn was in the band.
I was actually in the color guard. I wasn't in the band.
It's the band.
But I didn't play an instrument. I was in the color guard.
It's the band.
So, yeah.
Nothing wrong with the band. I'm all cool with the band. It's all right.
So, yeah, I mean, I was just a very straight-laced kind of gal. Had Shane and I known each other in high school, there is no way this would have never worked.
Chance. There's no way. She would have looked at me and been like, who's this loser jock guy that won't do anything and won't listen to teachers and all this stuff? So, yeah, I'm so glad. It's funny, like, the person I became was actually totally different even when you did meet me, because when I was in high school, I had a devastating knee injury. I actually was playing in a football game. I was playing linebacker, and this guy, they handed the guy the ball. He was on the 3-yard line, and I came running in to fill the gap, to fill the hole that was created because he was going to score a touchdown when they blocked our lineman. And I planted my foot. The guy dove for the end zone. My cleats went into the ground. The guy hits my knee, and all my weight falls forward with my foot pinned to the ground, and it snapped my ACL and my PCL in half. So I've never felt anything like that since, and I hope I never have to again. But I fell backwards, but right when he was laying on my foot, and my teammate went to kill him, and he hit me instead, and it literally turned my body 360 degrees. My shoulders were facing one goalpost, and my toe was facing the other, and it snapped all the other ligaments in my leg. And that moment basically ended my football career. And over the next, couple years, like my first year in college, my last year in high school, like I kind of became a different person because I was really down because I couldn't play the sport that kind of was my identity, right, anymore. But I started hanging around with different people more. I got away from that kind of jock culture a little bit. And it kind of humbled me and mellowed me out a little bit. And it's funny, like that moment in my life, I always point back to for a lot of different things. But if that had never happened to me, as negative and terrible as that was at that time, when I got to the point where I met Jocelyn, it made me a person that I think that she could accept. And I'm kind of glad it happened, because not only would that have not sent me down a career path, which I'll tell you more about later, that we're in now, we would not have been the right fit for each other.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. But I'll tell you, before we get to where we met, I'll tell you a couple other things about my high school career, because I think that they're relevant to where we are today. So first of all, I told you that I'm a high achiever. I always knew my entire life, not even just in high school, but my entire life, I just knew that I wanted something more than what most people in my town wanted. Most people in my town, they wanted to grow up, get a job, maybe have some kids.
And like young, like get married the day after graduation kind of thing.
And, if that's what you want to do, like, I don't judge you for it. It's just, I knew that's not what I wanted for me. I wanted something more. I didn't know what that something more was, but I just knew that I wanted something more.
And like, it's also important to remember too, our environment, especially in rural southern Kentucky, there's really high rates of teen pregnancy. There's really high rates of smoking and, drugs and things like that. So like, it's not this sanitized, everybody's walking up and down Main Street environment. You see a lot of people just check out of life, and there's not a lot of people trying to go to the next level. Like in the entrepreneur community, or when you discover like online business, man, you see hustlers, you see grinders, you see people wanting to 10X everything, and you see people wanting to change their life and change other people's lives and make a difference in the world. We do not see that. Like, we see 80% of our people that we grow up with, settle. I mean,
and that's okay with them, you know, and that's cool with them.
For some of them, they may not want to, but they don't feel like they got opportunity.
But it's never been okay for me. Like, I've just never wanted that for my life. So in the early 90s, I mentioned before that my dad's an engineer. In the early 90s, he realized that having a home computer and being online was going to be something super important. So I am so thankful that he bought us a PC back in 1993. I was 13 years old. It had a whopping 4 megabytes of RAM and a 256 megabyte hard drive.
That's big time right there now.
I mean, like, I have a memory stick right here in my drawer that probably holds a lot more than that.
Like the light bulb in our roof probably has more memory. Like the light bulb in the ceiling right now, like one of those LED lights that you can like control from your phone or something, probably is more powerful than that computer that you started with.
It had 8 megabytes of RAM. I can't remember the RAM exactly, but I know that it did have a 256 megabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
So it even had a modem. Okay. So we would connect to these local bulletin board systems. They're also called BBSs. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Through a 2400 baud modem.
That's not even 50, not even the 56K, like, you know what I'm saying? Not even like your phone modem. It was like this. I don't even know what baud means. Like, what is a baud?
I think I could seriously like crawl faster than this transferred data.
Like you could write down your message and run it to the guy on the other end of the bulletin board system and come back. I think
probably somewhere on the internet there's like a simulation of what 2400 baud would be like. So I hope that maybe our VAs can look up
find that
and like put it in the show notes for today, like what it would look like to load a website in 2400 baud. But of course, at the time it was just text, so there wasn't even like any pictures or anything.
But just early computer experience like that at the birth of the internet, basically.
But I learned to communicate with a computer. I mean, we didn't even use Windows. It was like old school DOS operating system. Like, I learned how to use that. And that was like invaluable experience for me just as a kid, like learning this on my own. I didn't have any instruction manual.
And that was a major investment, like at that time, for your dad and mom who didn't have a lot of, didn't have a lot of disposable income to do that.
And they just recognized that this is going to be something super important, and they went out on a limb and did it. And I am so thankful for that. Like, that is one moment in my life that I think was just critical to my future success. But my very first online experience was on the coal mine BBS. And it was a local bulletin board system, just where local people would talk. We logged in.
This was pre-Facebook. This was before Facebook, folks, or MySpace or anything like that.
And we went and met the sysops, the system operators. We went to meet them in person, like we knew them, and it was just a good time. So if you were on BBSs back in the 90s, it was good times.
I think I had a similar experience. Like my dad's old school. My dad was born like in the 40s, right after the Depression era, and wasn't like super into technology. Still isn't today. I'm pretty sure
definitely not.
Pretty sure his computer at his office is still like Windows 98 or something like that.
He may be using a flip phone.
He's using a flip phone, and I'm pretty sure he's like still like using Paint and stuff. You know what I mean? But like,
love him though.
Love the guy. And he doesn't even use a computer. He just got one sitting there and make him. It's just like, I got a computer. I don't use it, but whatever. But he would I remember when video games really took off, like Atari and Nintendo came out and like all these things. They were really expensive, but at Christmas time, he really wanted us to have these video game things. And he actually told me one time, he's like, I didn't understand computers. I didn't understand, what was going on or what it was, but I knew that this technology, you guys needed to know it. And he always made sure we had those things. You know what I'm saying? Like, not just from a kid perspective, but he wanted us to be familiar with technology. And it was cool because, like, I had friends that had computers. Like, I remember my cousin, his dad was like Jocelyn's dad. He was a postman. He was a post office guy, and he didn't understand really the computer, but he felt like he wanted to give his kids a better opportunity. So they spent he was going to buy a car or that computer, and he bought that computer. And I'm so thankful that he did, because I would walk up to their house to play like Wolfenstein 3D and learn how to type but I learned how to use DOS and stuff like that. So I think having some kind of technology background for sure was one of those dots that we connected later. And at least we spoke the words, the language and things like that. I'm not saying you got to have a technology background to do that, but we found that we used an unfair advantage there. Hey, we were exposed to that when a lot of kids, especially in our area in Kentucky, were just not being exposed to technology.
So I spent a lot of my high school days being obsessed with this PC. I mean, obsessed. So I would start taking programming classes. That's something that they offered at my high school, which is really kind of unusual. Like, there weren't a whole lot of people in those classes.
We didn't have it. We had typing. We had keyboarding on computers was the most advanced
we learned keyboarding
computer
too.
thing you got.
I learned keyboarding in middle school, but when we got to high school, we had a very limited selection of business classes, and one of those classes was computer programming. So I'm like, all right, I'm signing up for this. So I learned BASIC, and then I moved on to Pascal and started learning some C++, which is actually still used today. So now, do I still remember it? No, for a variety of reasons. But anyway, I learned those programming languages, and I started learning more and more about computers, and they started getting more and more sophisticated. And so that was the cool thing about it, is that, I just kept up with that and kept learning and kept getting better.
When you went to college, you were trying to be a programmer at first, right?
Yeah. And I've got some story about that as we move into the college days. But yeah, honestly, when I was in high school, I counted down the days until I could go out to college. And it wasn't because I had a bad home life. I had a fantastic home life. It was just because I just wanted something more. I didn't even know what that something more was. I just wanted something more. I was ready to get out.
And Jocelyn left her hometown. She moved to Lexington to go to the University of Kentucky. She was 17 because Jocelyn's really smart, and she skipped second grade or something.
I skipped
first grade, whatever. She skipped a grade, and she literally turned 17 in March of her senior year, and that summer. I mean,
in August.
Can you imagine having a 17-year-old right now and letting them do? Would you let your kids do that?
No, and
because they'll meet bad people like you, Shane.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, you have to remember. So back in the 90s, this was 1997 when I moved to the University of Kentucky. People didn't have cell phones. I mean, a few people did, but a lot of people didn't even have cell phones. So my parents sent their barely 17-year-old daughter
in a shoddy car that
in a 1989 Buick Skyhawk.
Buick Skyhawk that barely ran. And one time we drove that Jocelyn had this car. Man, it was, what'd you call it, Myrtle or Ethel?
Ethel. Yeah.
Ethel. She called it Ethel.
Hey, I loved Ethel.
Ethel was a good car. I do miss Ethel. Ethel was a good old girl. But one time the muffler broke or fell off or something.
I'm pretty sure it fell off.
Literally, we're driving, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's a car. And then it goes wah 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 wah. Because it's terrible when the muffler's not on a car. And we're like, did the muffler just fall off? And she's like, I saw sparks. So yeah, I think so. But we had to go back to Jocelyn's hometown for the weekend or something, and we didn't. I think my car was broke down or something too. Something was going on, so we drove her car there. And we went all the way back to her hometown, a 3-hour drive with no muffler. That was bad on the ears that time.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
So
it's funny you say that, though, before because we're about to go to the next phase here. But, Jocelyn looks back, and you're so, systematic now and, process oriented and things like that. And that experience with the computers that you had, you were drawn to that. Like you said, you were obsessed with it. And I think about going back to high school, I just hated school. And I think about the things that I did like I liked to be talking and argumentative. So I really loved history, political science, and debate style classes. And also, like, I loved those video editing classes and anything where I could take my imagination and be creative. And it's funny how we both, even in our business today, if you look at our roles, how that you connect the dots and it kind of gravitates toward those things. You do deal with a lot of the systematic process stuff, even the technology stuff. You talk to our Infusionsoft contractor and things like that, where I'm doing more like producing the kids' YouTube channels and working with our editor to make things sound and look right. And it's funny how some people, I think, that are listening right now may not be connecting all those little things you take for granted that you could use to build some kind of epic life and business out of, basically.
Just remember that when you start looking back at things from your life, like there are experiences that are beneficial for you as you move forward in your online business or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Like you might not even think about it right now, but as you think back, then you just remember that, hey, this experience happened for a reason and maybe it can benefit me in the future.
Yeah, I think that what's really important about that part of our journey too, and like your journey as you're listening to this show, is knowing that there is something else and knowing that you want something else is the most important part of this entire formula, this entire process, because you take our parents were, we've already said they were really, really hard workers. They all built lives out of nothing, basically. They didn't have a lot, but they kept building, kept stacking. They didn't really know outside of our community. They didn't really know there were other jobs out there. They didn't really know there were other things that they might be able to do or grow. We didn't really know that until maybe 5 or 6 years ago when we started our journey. Like we just thought this is the way life was. The world told us we need to get jobs. We need to be secure. We need to be safe. We need to be stable. We need to prepare for the worst case scenario all the time and just hang on and wait till retirement or whatever. But when you make the decision, I want something else. When you make the decision, I'd like to model that person. I think I could do that too. And when you look around at your life and you say, there's more to this, I can go do this. And you're like Jocelyn, and she leaves when she's 17 to go find out what that is. Or me getting frustrated and bored with what I was doing and saying, no, I'm going to go out and pursue, another career. That's the most important part of this whole thing. And what we're telling you here is look back at everything in your life, every experience leads you to a moment where you want something more and then take action to go do that. And you have all the equipment, all the tools built inside of you, whether you knew how to use computers or didn't, whether you played sports or didn't, or whatever it is. And you can make something happen out of that if you put all those puzzle pieces together. So guys, that's kind of the first part of our journey. That's the first part of our life. That's the backstory of kind of how Jocelyn and I grew up. And the next week, what we're going to get into is actually going to college, where we met and how I knew that I was going to marry this beautiful girl across from me on the microphone right now. I knew it. The first time I saw her. And she did not quite know it yet. She resisted the magnetic pull of my romance.
Can you blame me?
And but that's what we're going to get into next week. We're going to talk about basically how our lives, our paths crossed, and how we got into our relationship, and how we dated for 7 years almost before we got married, and all that stuff that kind of kicked off the journey that led us to where we are today. And as we go through this journey, you're going to learn a lot about how we started our online business, how we built our online business, how we made it happen. But what we really want to do is just inspire you. We have so many examples in the entrepreneur community. You see these, young single millennials, or you see these people that are, living in Thailand off $8 a week, or you see, these people who are like work 95 hours a week, and they're swearing and they're cussing and they're screaming about, how you got to be a hustler, a grinder, and do this and do that. But we want to just show you our story so that you can be inspired and realize we're just normal people. You're normal people. But you can do extraordinary things when you really set your mind to it, and you really want to flip your world upside down. You want to flip your life. You want to try to live the flipped lifestyle, and you want to make a change that not only changes your life, but it changes your family tree and your kids' lives. So that's the point of these. I hope you're enjoying this. We will be back next week to give you the next step in our journey. Hope that you guys get a lot out of this. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little while, and we can't wait to see you again next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this best of edition of the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. We would love to help you take your next steps toward your goals. We have a free online business quick start course over at our website at flippedlifestyle.com. This course will help you set big goals and make them happen, find and validate your ideas today, and help you identify and find your perfect customers. Our online business quick start guide is a free resource, and you can get it right now over at flippedlifestyle.com. That's FLIPPED lifestyle.com. Head there right now and download your free resource today.